All right, family, real quick, why you should not be intimidated by the ELDT, the entry-level driver training program that is going to start next year, February 7th, 2022, which involves the process of getting a CDL. I spoke about this the other day on a live stream, but lives are always weird, man. I always have a hard time collecting my thoughts during live. I've gotten a few comments, a few emails for people that had questions, right? So I want to clear up some of the stuff that I don't feel like I cleared up very well on the live stream that I did the other day talking about this subject. So if you followed me pretty good on the live stream the other day, I'm simply recapping kind of what I went over in that live stream, in that video, going to a little bit more depth in this video. But essentially that's what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to try to help you guys to get a little bit of a better perspective on what to expect next year from the ELDT program. Most of what I've been reading online and listening to online has it's kind of like people are saying, you know, hurry up and get your CDL before February 7th next year. If you don't get it now, it's going to be super hard to get it next year. It's going to take super long to get it next year. The cost is going to be more next year. I'm going to kind of debunk some of that, and I'm going to kind of give you my perspective, my take on why I don't believe any of that is true, not from what I'm reading about the ELDT program. I'm going to share with you some of the stuff that I'm reading to kind of help anybody that wants to know, basically want to help you guys understand why you shouldn't be intimidated by the changes that are going to happen next year, okay? So I'm going to start by going to tpr.fmcsa what is it? tpr.fmcsa.gov is the website that I'm going to. That's what we're going to start off with this right here, okay? And the TPR in that stands for Training Provider Registry. This is the FMCSA website. So I'm getting this information here from the horse's mouth, all right? So I'm not going to read everything to you here. I'm just going to read the relevant info that's going to help you to understand exactly what to expect February if you want to get a CDL after February 7th, 2022. Again, I feel that most of what is being put out online and on videos and on blog posts can be a little bit misleading. People, you know, trying to sell fear, trying to get views or whatever. I'm gonna put that into perspective here, okay? So let's kind of start from the top right here. Again, I'm not gonna read everything here. I'm just gonna read the relevant stuff. So follow along with me, okay? Coming February 7th, 2022. Let's start off I'm assuming that you already know what you watching this video already know what the ELDT program is. If you don't, I'm going to read up a little bit about it right here, but I'm assuming you kind of already know what it is, all right? Coming February 7th, 2022, the Training Provider Registry, TPR, will improve highway safety by ensuring that entry-level drivers of commercial motor vehicles, CMVs, complete training as required by the new entry-level driver training regulations. Okay, so let's scroll down here a little bit before I add in my commentary. What are the entry-level driver training regulations? The ELDT regulations set the minimum federal requirements for training that entry-level drivers must complete before being permitted to take certain commercial driver's license skills or knowledge tests on or after February 7th, 2022. So real quick, what the ELDT program basically says is anybody that wants to get a CDL after February 7th, 2022 has to go to CDL school so that they can take this ELDT training. It's something that's going to be instituted, if you will, by CDL schools, by training providers. So essentially the days of being able to go and get a CDL on your own are ending with this program. So the first thing I want to deal with here that most people are not understanding is that this does not affect everyone. This only affects the people that want to get a CDL without going to school after February the 7th, 2022, okay? Because that is really the main change. If you want to get a CDL now, you have to go through a training provider that is listed on the training provider registry so that you can take this ELDT training along with all of your other CDL schooling. So that's the main change. So the only people that this affects, doesn't affect everyone as some some articles would have you believe, it only affects those that are interested in getting a CDL after February the 7th, 2022 without going to school. If you were planning on going to school, nothing changes. If you were going to go to school before February the 7th and you said, well, I'm thinking about going before or after, but I was going to go to school anyway, then it don't matter whether you go before or after, okay? So let me scroll down a little bit more here. Who is considered an entry-level driver? This is who this applies to, okay? Entry-level drivers are those, let me just read word for word. Who is considered an entry-level driver? Individuals applying to obtain a Class A CDL or Class B CDL for the first time. Individuals looking to upgrade an existing Class B CDL to a Class A CDL. And individuals that are looking to obtain a school bus S endorsement, a passenger P endorsement, or hazardous materials H endorsement for the first time. This is who is considered an entry-level driver. All right, so I am a Class A driver just for the sake of speaking from the perspective that I'm familiar with. If you want to get a Class A after February the 7th, 2022, again, the difference is you got to go to school now, whereas you might have been thinking about not going to school before February the 7th, 2022. Okay, so that's the only people it affects, the people that didn't want to go to school to get their CDL after February the 7th. All right. Let me scroll down a little bit. Again, everything that's here, you know the website, tpr.fmcsa.dot.gov. I leave it in the link of this video. You can go there and read up on all of this stuff yourself. It tells you here who the exceptions to the ELDT rule. Again, you can read that. I don't really want to get into that because I'm trying to prove a point with this video right here, and I want to keep it as short as possible. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of this page that I'm on right here, this part that you're looking at on your screen right now, which says read the ELDT regulations. There's 5 different parts right here. Not all of these pertain to CDL applicants. The one that pertains to CDL applicants is this first one right here. Entry-level driver training requirements on and after February the 7th, 2022. 49 CFR Part 380, Subpart F. So let's go there now, okay? All right, so just again, not all of this is relevant to CDL applicants. I'm going to do my best to just read what's relevant to you individuals that's looking to get your CDL, all right? Let's see. Registry of Entry-Level Driver Training Providers on and after February the 7th. Compliance date for training requirements for entry-level. Compliance with the provisions of subparts required on February 7th. All right. Purpose and scope of this initial part, just so you can understand where I am on this page. This subpart establishes training requirements for entry-level drivers. So they're going to tell you in this part what the training requirements, what the federal training requirements are for entry-level drivers. So stick around again, because in this part, I'm going to share with you what exactly to expect from the changes that are going to go into play February the 7th, 2022. As defined in this subpart and minimum content for theory and behind-the-wheel training curricula. Let me read that sentence again because that's relevant. This subpart establishes training requirements for entry-level drivers as defined in this subpart and minimum content for theory and behind-the-wheel training curricula. Entry-level driver training, as defined in this subpart, applies only to those individuals who apply for a commercial driver's license, CDL, or CDL upgrade or endorsement and does not otherwise amend substantive CDL requirements. Okay, so again, it's basically saying who this applies to, all right? Applicability, let's see if I can scroll down with this here. This part talks about who it applies to. Again, we already read over that, who is considered an entry-level driver trainer, okay? Rules in this subpart apply to all entry-level driver trainers as defined in this subpart. Drivers accepted from the CDL requirements under... Okay, so that's irrelevant right there. Let me scroll down some. So they define a lot of the terms that they use on this page here. This is, again, not a part that I'm going to get into deeply, but this is something that's relevant because they define all of the terms that are used in explaining what they want to explain on this page. So some of the relevant definitions are behind the wheel instructor. Another relevant term that you'll see here is behind the wheel BTW public road training, behind the wheel range training. They're clearly defining all of these terms here. Entry level driver, entry-level driver training, what a range is, what theory instruction is, what a theory instructor is. And again, when I get to the next part, you'll see the relevance of all of these terms, but they're defining all of the relevant terms pertaining to what they're explaining here on this page. They define what a training provider is, okay? Now, here, we're on the general entry-level driver training requirements, and this is a reiteration of something I already went over. An individual who applies for the first time for a Class A or Class B CDL, or who upgrades to a Class A or B CDL, must complete driver training from a provider listed on the training provider registry as set forth in subpart G, telling you what is expected of you, the entry-level driver, okay? And then it goes into the other individuals, the individuals seeking a passenger, a school bus, or a hazardous endorsement, all right? So that's it for that part. Now, this next part is not relevant to you, but I do want to point out what you're looking at here. This is subpart G, Registry of Entry-Level Driver Training Providers on and after February the 7th, 2022. Let's go down to this right here. This talks about the scope. The rules in this subpart establish the eligibility requirements for listing on FMCSA's training provider registry. So this whole section right here basically tells training providers what they have to do to be eligible to be listed on the registry. So again, this is not relevant to you, but the reason I wanted you to know what you're looking at on your screen, this particular part right here, is because, in my opinion, people think that the CDL applicants are the ones that have to make the biggest changes with this ELDT program. I personally, based on what I'm reading and seeing, feel like the training providers are the ones that are going to have to potentially make the biggest changes, all right? And not all training providers are going to have to make changes, only the training providers that are not doing already what this federal program wants training providers to do, all right? So what I'm saying will make more sense to you in 1 second. Let me scroll down here to the relevant part to you right here. Entry-level training provider. This is all stuff talking about, this is talking to the training providers right here. This is not relevant to the CDL applicant. And as you can see, they got a long section right here. And this kind of backs up what I was saying just now. Like they are the ones that have to deal with all of the federal compliance now. All right. So I'm going down here to go past this part. There's a lot of stuff that they have to do. Okay, here's the relevant part to the CDL applicants, okay? And this is the part right here that actually explains to you what the feds say have to be taught in the ELDT program. So right now I'm going to kind of deal with individuals that feel like this whole process is going to be harder, or it's going to take longer because of this ELDT program, because there are a lot of individuals that believe that because of the ELDT program, it's going to be harder to get a CDL and it's going to take longer to get a CDL, all right? So I'm going to prove to you right now, well, I'm going to share with you why I don't think that it will, all right? So just stick around. Class A CDL training curriculum. This is what the feds say you have to be taught in your CDL training. Class A CDL applicants must complete the Class A CDL curriculum outlined in this appendix. The curriculum for Class A applicants pertains to combination vehicles, Group A, as defined in 49 CFR, Class A CDL applicants who possess a valid Class B CDL may complete the theory instruction, that's one of those words they defined up top of this page, may complete the theory instruction upgrade curriculum in lieu of the theory instruction standard curriculum, all right? So don't want to spend too much time explaining what that meant. I just want to keep going here, okay? There is no required minimum number of instruction hours for theory training, but the training instructor must cover all topics set forth in the curriculum. There is no required minimum number of instruction hours for behind the wheel, range, and public road training, but the training instructor must cover all topics set forth in the behind the wheel curriculum. Okay, somebody was asking the question on the comments in the live stream, why is it that there's no time limit for, for how much time they have to give you theory-based training or behind the wheel training? So I want to explain what you just now heard. Okay, so let me read it again. There is no required minimum number of instruction hours for theory training, but the training instructor must cover all topics set forth in the curriculum. Now, I want you to keep in mind that this is federal guidelines, and I'm not an expert on this subject, but here's my take on it. CDL driver's licenses and period normally is a state issue. And I would assume that states already have their standards on what they expect individuals to be taught by training providers in order for them to get a CDL, okay? And so essentially what I'm saying is if the state has a certain requirement of what has to be done to get a CDL, then these federal guidelines don't override the state guidelines. So hypothetically, and I don't know this to be true, but this is my perspective on it, if the state says you need, we'll just throw a number out, 160 hours of behind the wheel training or CDL training before you can get a CDL, before you can take the test. And then the feds are saying here, there is no minimum amount of time that you have to, that your training provider has to give you for this training. The federal guidelines don't override the state guidelines. That's essentially the point that I'm trying to make. If the state requires such and such a certain thing to be done, then that is what has to be done. These are just the federal guidelines, all right? So now that's talking about the theory instruction, and it defined theory instruction at the top, but theory instruction is basically classroom instruction. That's essentially what it boils down to, okay? Let me go to the next sentence. There also is no required minimum number of instruction hours for behind the wheel, range, and public road training, but the training instructor must cover all topics set forth in the behind the wheel curriculum. So again, the feds are saying here, and these got minimum guidelines, that there is no required minimum number of instruction hours for theory training or behind the wheel training, but the instructor must cover all the topics set forth in the behind the wheel curriculum, which is below. I'm gonna get to that in just 1 second. So again, it's the same exact thing. The feds are saying there's no minimum number of hours that a CDL applicant has to be given in behind the wheel training, but your state probably has a minimum number of hours. I know my state has a minimum number of hours that CDL applicants need to have in order to be able to get a CDL. And the point that I'm trying to make with this is these minimum federal guidelines don't override state guidelines. If the state says a certain thing has to be done, and then the feds say, well, we're okay with less of that being done, to get a CDL in that state, you're gonna have to do what it takes to get a CDL in that state. All right. So behind the wheel training must be conducted in a commercial motor vehicle for which a Class A CDL is required. Makes sense. The instructor must determine and document that each driver trainee has demonstrated proficiency in all elements of the behind the wheel curriculum, unless otherwise noted. Consistent with the definitions of behind the wheel training, which are above, I showed you that earlier, and behind the wheel public road training, a simulation device cannot be used to conduct such training or to demonstrate proficiency. Training instructors must document the total number of clock hours each driver trainee spends to complete the behind the wheel curriculum. The Class A curriculum must, at a minimum, include the following. Here's the important part right here. I just wanted you to hear that this is, they're saying exactly what is expected that the training provider will take the CDL applicant through. They give it all right here, okay? Theory instruction, standard curriculum. I read that term earlier in this article. Here's the standard curriculum for the theory instruction. And again, theory instruction is just classroom instruction. All right. So a portion of your CDL training, now that you have to go to school after February the 7th, 2022, has to be theory-based instruction, has to be classroom instruction. Okay. And here is what you will be taught in the classroom. Let me go back up here. There we go. Section A1. Now listen closely at these topics. This will all make sense to you in just 1 second. Why? Just because this change is coming about in February, this is not going to make it harder to get a CDL or make it a longer process to get a CDL, not for individuals that were planning on going to school anyway. Section A1, basic operation. This is the stuff, theory instruction that you need to be taught, that they're going to go over with you in the classroom. Basic operation. Orientation. This unit must introduce driver trainees to the combination vehicle driver training curriculum and the components of a combination vehicle. A112, control systems, your dashboard. A113, pre and post trip inspections. Basic control. Shifting/operating transmissions. This is the stuff that they will be covering with you in the classroom. Backing and docking, coupling and uncoupling, safe operating procedures, visual search, communication, distracted driving, speed management, space management, night operation, extreme driving conditions, advanced operating practices, hazard perception, skid control recovery, jackknifing and other emergencies, railroad highway grade crossings, vehicle systems and reporting malfunctions, identification and diagnosis of malfunctions, roadside inspections, maintenance, non-driving activities, handling and documenting cargo, environmental compliance issues, hours of service requirements, fatigue and wellness awareness. Let me stop for a second. If you're listening to me go through these topics right now and you're thinking to yourself, okay, so he's telling me that this is the stuff that they're going to have to teach us in the classroom. This sounds like basic stuff that they're supposed to be teaching in the classroom anyway. If you're sitting there thinking that right now, or if you're an individual that already went through CDL school and you're like, well, yeah, they took us through some classroom stuff and this was the stuff that they took us in through the classroom. This is it right here. If you're sitting there thinking that right now, then that is the whole thing that I'm trying to share on this video. I went to CDL school almost 6 years ago now, before this ELDT program was being put into place. And as I'm reading through the stuff that's on this page that the training providers have to take their CDL applicants through, I'm thinking back to what my training provider, my CDL school, which was Shipper's Choice in Chester, Virginia, shout out to them. I'll tell you why in 1 second. But I'm thinking back to the process that they took us through and what they taught us, and it's what's already in here. It's what's already in here, okay? So let me keep going with this because I don't want to stretch this out too long. Post-crash procedures, external communications. There is some more relevant info in here. So if you stick it with me this long, stick around, because, we're just talking about the theory-based portion, the classroom-based portion. They're going to go through what training providers have to teach you on the range and behind the road, on the public road as well. I'm going to cover that in just 1 second. Whistleblower coercion, trip planning, drugs, alcohol, medical requirements. Now, that is what has to be taught to the CDL applicants in the theory instruction, in the classroom portion. It's the same stuff that they taught us 6 years ago. I don't see anything different on that list than what my training provider went through with me in the classroom at Shipper's Choice, okay? Now, here is the behind the wheel, the range training. This is the minimum federal guidelines that the feds are saying that training providers have to teach CDL applicants. We just went over what has to be taught in the classroom. Now this part is going to show you what they have to teach you on the range. And they defined earlier in this article what a range is if you got questions on that part. Behind the wheel range training much teach driving exercises related to basic vehicle control skills and mastery of basic maneuvers, okay? Now here's what they're teaching you on the range. Vehicle inspection pre-trip, post-trip, straight line backing, alley dock backing, offset backing, parallel parking blindside, parallel parking sight side, coupling and uncoupling, and that is what they have to teach. The next section goes into behind the wheel public road. So that is the summary of what the training providers, according to the federal minimum standards that's being put into place February the 7th, that is what they now have to teach you on the range. Now, if you went to school already and you're sitting there and you're hearing this and you're saying, well, I went through some classroom quote unquote theory-based training. They taught me the same stuff that he read off, and I went through some range training with my training provider as well, and on the range they taught me the same stuff that is in this section right here. They taught me all of these different ways of backing, coupling and uncoupling. They taught me the post-trip and pre-trip. That's what they taught me on the range. If you're sitting there thinking that right now, again, this proves my point that the process is not going to get, I'm saying it's not going to get any more difficult. When I went to school, Shipper's Choice in Chester 6 years ago, the range training that they gave us was exactly what is already here. So what am I saying with this? I'm going to continue on. I'm going to show you what is in the behind the wheel public road training section as well. But what am I saying with all of this? The training providers, certain training providers were already providing this level of training. They were already doing this stuff. So those training providers, in my opinion, I don't see the process at Shipper's Choice, and I'm saying Shipper's Choice is that school I went through, based on what I know that they take their students through, and based on what I'm seeing here on your screen right now, it's not going to take them any longer to do the process because they're doing the same thing. It's not going to be any more difficult for their CDL applicants to get a CDL because they're teaching them the same thing that they were already teaching them before February the 7th. The only people, I'm going to say again, that this is affecting is the individuals that were planning on getting a CDL without going to school at all after February the 7th, 2022. And this also affects, which I mentioned earlier, some training providers. But again, I don't think it'll affect a training provider like Shipper's Choice, like the one that I went to, again, because they were already doing this stuff. I think this will affect the training providers that weren't doing this stuff. Now they gotta, if there are any training providers out there that weren't doing all of this, now they gotta start doing this. And it may cost them more to institute these new things that they weren't already doing. The cost of those CDL schools may go up, but I don't really see any reason why a school like Shipper's Choice would have to up their tuition costs, because it's not going. I don't see it costing them any more to do this because they're already doing it. Okay. Let me share with you real quick. I just shared with you what the feds say CDL applicants have to be taught in theory, the classroom part. I just showed with you what the feds are saying the minimum standards are for what CDL applicants have to be taught in behind the wheel range training. This is what the feds say the minimum. This is what training providers have to teach their students in behind the wheel, the public road section of the ELDT training. Unit 831, vehicle controls, including left turn, right turn, lane changes, curves at highway speeds, and entry and exit on interstate or controlled access highway. I have a 28 CDL tips that you can download. I leave the link in the description section of most of my videos. It'll be in the description section of this video as well. And in that, in those 28 tips, I share with you right there everything, and some more stuff as well, but everything that's being talked about right here. Vehicle controls, including left turn, right turn, lane changes, curves at highway speeds. I talk about all of that stuff in my 28 tips. I made that 28 tips when I took my CDL test 6 years ago. It's just as relevant now as it was then. So this is, again, this is the feds saying this is what we want training providers to do. My training provider was already doing this, okay? Shifting, transmission, communications, signaling, visual search, speed and space management, safe driver behavior, hours of service, hazard perception, railroad highway grade crossing, night operation, extreme driving conditions, skid control recovery, jackknifing, and other emergencies. Now and that is what has to be taught in the behind the wheel public road section of your ELDT training. Again, if you're sitting there and you already went to school and you already got your CDL and you're still listening to my voice at this point and you're saying that's the same thing they taught us in behind the wheel public road training when I went to CDL school, you're only that's my whole point. My point is there were training providers that were already doing this right here. And for them, I don't see the individuals going to those training providers. I don't see the process being any longer after February the 7th than it was before February the 7th. I don't see the process being any more difficult. And if the school was already doing this level of training, then they don't have a reason to up their price. I'm not saying schools won't up their price, but I am saying I don't see a reason why the school would, it's not costing them more to do this program, okay? It's going to cost more for a school that wasn't doing this stuff because now they gotta do this, or they're gonna have to they're gonna have to go out of business. They're gonna have to comply or go out of business. And as you saw earlier in this article, there's a lot of stuff that training providers have to comply with. So I'm gonna say again, the biggest change I feel has to come from training providers that weren't already doing the stuff that you're looking at right here on this screen. Earlier, you remember I read something that's saying that Class B drivers, if they wanted to upgrade, they could just, I've read this, they could just take the theory instruction upgrade instead of the theory instruction standard, which basically means that, you won't have to do the whole thing all over again if you want to upgrade from a B to an A. So here they talk about what is expected in the theory instruction upgrade. If you want to upgrade your CDL from a B to an A, and the whole thing, they cover everything that is that your training provider will have to cover with you in the upgrade curriculum. It's all right here. Everything is right here. So, I think I hope I've made my point at this point, because I don't want to stretch this out any longer than it needs to be. I will stop share. What I was showing you, what I was attempting to show you here, is why I don't see a reason why anybody should be intimidated by the ELDT changes, the program that's going to be put into place February the 7th, 2022. I've read and heard a lot of information online where individuals are like, hurry up and get it. If you don't, you're not going to be able to get it, or it's going to cost twice as much, or it's going to take 5 times as long to get. And that is just not what I'm getting from what I'm reading. So, if you were planning on going to school, after February the 7th to get your CDL, if you were planning on going to school before February the 7th, 2022 to get your CDL, unless you were planning on not going at all, or unless you were planning on going to a subpar training provider, nothing changes for you as far as I'm concerned. Process is going to take, I went to CDL school 6 years ago, and I went on weekends. Shipper's Choice had a program that took 30 days. They took you through everything that you were just reading on your screen that I just showed you. They took us through all of that. The full-time people, they took them through that process in 30 days. I don't see anything that I read just now that the feds are saying that has to be done now that is going to make Shipper's Choice say, well, damn, now it's going to take us 45 days to take people through this process. I went on weekends. I went every other weekend for 2 months. I went every weekend for 2 months, 60 days, 8 hours a day. And I finished CDL school on time, and I went through everything that you guys just now read on the screen. And so I don't see people that are going to CDL school after February the 7th going to Shipper's Choice and going part-time. It shouldn't take them any longer than 2 months to go through the program, and it shouldn't take full-timers any longer than 30 days to go through Shipper's Choice program. So shout out to Shipper's Choice. I got to shout them out because, again, it's like, damn, once I'm reading through all that, I'm like, my training provider was already doing this. So I don't see it getting any harder. I don't see it being any more difficult. And because of that, I don't think you should be intimidated by the ELDT program. Hope you got some value from this video. If you did, be sure to go below and give me a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, The Helpful Trucker here. Be sure to, because I like to upload helpful videos every so often. And if you don't want to miss any, you need to subscribe.